Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Reverse Engineering Podcast. I am your co-host Alvaro, and with me today is Jen.
Hey, how's it going?
And our guest is Lori Wired. Welcome.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
We're really doing the full podcast, aren't we?
Yep. So the reason we reached out is, we've been watching your videos for a bit, and then also some of our folks in Discord suggested, hey, y'all should talk to Lori. And so we finally reached out, and now we're here. So thank you so much. And for everyone else who hasn't seen your videos, which probably not going to be a lot of people, I think most of the RE folks have probably heard of you by now, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Lori Wired, obviously. I do a lot of reverse engineering, mostly targeting mobile platforms like Android and iOS. I also have a YouTube channel that does a lot of different reverse engineering like tutorials and explorations. And I also like to teach low-level assembly programming. I think it's really cool. And then I speak at quite a few different conferences, probably mostly of note, DEF CON and Objective by the Sea.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I like the name of that one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, can you tell it's Apple related? So, yeah, it's perfect.
Yep.
That's very cute. So kind of like a side thing that came up as I was, going back and watching some more videos is that a while back, I was telling Alvaro, like, oh, you should see, somehow it came up in the podcast, so you should watch this series, this anime series, Lane, which he had never heard. Most people had heard, but I was watching your videos. I'm like, this isn't the style of Lane. Like every facet of it is.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But he has no idea. He still hasn't watched it.
Oh, that's so sad. It's such a good show.
Really good.
It's very confusing.
Oh, great. I'll add it to the list. So how did you get into reverse engineering in the first place?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. It was a little bit of a happy accident. So I started out as a software engineer. I was getting my bachelor's degree in computer science, and I was also working for an aerospace company at the same time. And I had just finished my degree, just graduated, so I was trying to look and see, are there any other really good jobs that I can get? You apply to like 100 different places and get maybe 2 calls back. So I found this one job that was focusing on low-level programming, like C, C++, which is kind of what I'm most interested in. And it mentioned some about assembly, and I thought that was pretty cool. So I applied, and then I get the initial call, and they're talking to me about reverse engineering and malware analysis. And at that point, I was like, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but that sounds pretty cool. So I did the second round of interviews, and luckily I had previous experience from college with assembly programming. And I just kind of took 2 weeks to read as much practical malware analysis as I possibly could, and ended up getting the job and kind of teaching myself all of the stuff from there, and it was really cool.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, few people these days are doing assembly unless it's for reverse engineering, I think. It's surprising, I guess, these days.
I mean, so I think in college they teach, at least most good programs I know of, teach some assembly programming.
Do they?
They should. I learned MIPS, so that's what I knew, and then I was like, okay, here's x86.
But they all kind of are the same. What did we learn? I learned x86 first, and then computer architecture was all MIPS based, and then that allowed me to work for MIPS later on because I remembered something.
Mine was MSP 430 assembly. That was
wow.
my intro, which is nice because it's a very, very small, set of instructions.
Oh no! Wait, I have it wrong. Our logic lab class, they let us do something, and I think it was an 8051 or an HC11E thingy, but it wasn't like explaining what the hell was happening. Just figure your shit out.
But as an like embedded systems person, back in the day, we were all about assembly, but these days compilers are so damn good that we rarely and microcontrollers are so damn fast. I think that's a bigger issue.
I have a side bonus question that's aside. We write down all of our questions, so nothing should be a surprise. But this is a surprise one. Lori, do you have a favorite assembly instruction?
Oh, that's tricky. I mean, I can go for like the default easy one, like move EAX, and just be like, there's a no op.
Yeah.
That's a fun one to just be like, ooh, here's some assembly knowledge.
Yeah. I'm trying to maybe it was PowerPC that has an EIEIO instruction. and then there's always an instruction for like a hardware breakpoint or a software breakpoint, SBBP, I think it is. Do I have that right? I think that's
probably depends on the
but they all tend to be similar. Anyway.
EIEIO. I love that. That's amazing. Maybe that will be my favorite one going forward.
You gotta. It's not gonna help you if you can't explain it.
That's true.
Okay. Thank you for tolerating a random pop-up question.
Oh yeah, of course.
So you started you got into reverse engineering through one of these jobs. How did you become kind of a YouTube reverse engineering person?
Well, I started focusing mostly on mobile reverse engineering. It kind of appeared as a challenge because there's not too much information that's available in the mobile reverse engineering space. Like if you start looking at Android RE, there's a few resources out there, but there's a severe lack of information that's available. And then if you pivot towards iOS reversing, there's basically nothing. And so I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. Maybe there's a gap that needs to be potentially filled.
So, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah, sure. So I was just thinking that it would be nice if there was some information available for both of these spaces. And I thought it might be best to do that on YouTube because you can have all of the in-depth explanations as well as kind of the personal aspect of explaining the material.
And I will make the comment that your kind of post-production and kind of everything is so nice. Like there's the YouTubers that just record themselves speaking and just post it. And then there's you and a select few others that actually spend the time and make nice graphics and explanation. It helps a ton, but I know it's a ton of work.
Well, step one, she decided to go with a visual medium to explain something that is mostly visual, unlike us.
Well, the issue with reverse engineering is, like, I'm saying this as a reverse engineer myself, can get pretty dry if you've been looking at something for hours and hours. So I think having like visual aspects to it and exciting pop-ups like a corgi or something keeps you more entertained. It's like, oh, here's a ton of assembly, but also here's a corgi. So I'm happy
Definitely.
now.
Yeah.
And kind of technical side question, do you do that all kind of in post, or are you doing it real time with OBS kind of?
Oh, in post,
okay.
Yeah.
You watch. She's trying to like captivate people and produce highly technical content, and you're asking if she has a corgi button. Is that your question?
I mean, Twitch streamers do it, right?
Well, I actually do Twitch stream as well, and I have a lot of stuff that's kind of live right there. So that is actually a button. I have a button called Monkey. And that just pops up like my Be Right Back screen, which is just a monkey driving a golf cart.
Okay. Since we're on the subject of that, do you on your set of buttons, do you have a button that plays sad piano music?
I do not, but maybe I should.
On Zencastr, we do.
That's amazing.
We didn't put it there. I think it's one of the defaults, but we had too much fun with it last time.
You're like, what does this do? This is not reverse engineering, by the way. We try to stay on topic.
Right.
We never do. Where were we? Oh, yeah. So yeah. So there is source for Android. Not a lot of comments, but a lot of information out there about like how things get built up, and then of course there's the Linux kernel and so on. And then as you already mentioned, like what's going on with, iOS, which is it's all pretty much obfuscated, but still mostly ARM driven. Do we consider this still an ARM platform on some level or no? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's primarily ARM. Both Android and iOS are primarily ARM based for real physical devices.
Yeah. Yeah, screw MIPS.
Android TV is another story.
You think so?
Or sorry, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they're all.
I think
ARM
they're
these
all
days.
ARM-ish. MIPS.
Some of the
MIPS
stuff
is
is still
long
like
gone.
x86.
There is some support for MIPS, but I see it way less. Way less.
Yeah, maybe there's some vestiges of words. There's some last lingering bits in like the set-top box, but you have to really look hard these days. Like really hard. Okay, back on reverse engineering. Okay, so the question was mostly ARM and mostly not documented. So I guess my question is like, because most of my experience with like the mobile exploration and tools on there is primarily through like things like Black Hoodie and those types of workshops.
hmm
Like when I look at that, it doesn't seem like it's a lot of the type of analysis is mostly at the code level, like Java and so forth. Like, how are you digging into this stuff? Are you really looking at the assembly level, or is it mostly kernel level? Like, walk us through that a little bit.
Well,
without putting you on the spot.
it depends. Oh yeah, no problem. It depends if you're focusing on Android or iOS. I can kind of give like a little background into both. Initially, if you're digging into an Android application, you are in the managed code space primarily, like right from the get-go. That can be written in either Java or Kotlin languages. Android supports both. However, Android does also support having native code in C or C++, and you can communicate using the Java native interface for all of that. Now, that being said, a lot of malware authors, which I'll focus on because that's kind of my primary focus, will avoid using native code initially probably because it's hard. You have to understand how to use the JNI and stuff like that. However, I do see a really large shift towards adding additional native code inside of Android applications because, yes, it's hard for the malware author, but it's even harder for the reverse engineer at this point because then you're taking compiled binaries and you can throw them inside of Ghidra, IDRA, but you have to be able to understand what you're looking at. And at that point, like, I'm a big proponent of looking at the decompiler, and it does a really good job of like auto-labeling JNI calls and stuff like that. So, yeah, there is quite a bit of digging into assembly and stuff if you're looking inside of Android applications as well. But your initial view is basically always going to be Java.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you Ghidra or IDA? What's your favorite for decompiling?
Oh, Ghidra all the way, because it's free, and I like free things.
What, you don't have piles of money just sitting around to pay like every year?
I do not. I don't even remember what is the cost of IDA right now. It's pretty pricey,
20,
and it's
at
all
least,
in different
at least
components.
2,000 plus.
Oh yeah. I mean, Ghidra does a great job for cross-platform samples. Like, I would say almost just as good.
I mean, we're paying for it with our tax dollars, right? So it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just paid for it a whole lot this past week.
Oh, that's right. You got 10 days.
Oh yeah.
Get your taxes in, everybody.
For the folks outside of the U.S., April 15th is when we have to pay our taxes.
But we also have to calculate our taxes.
Yes.
Unlike every other country, yeah.
Painful.
So we're talking about Android and iOS. What's your favorite target to reverse engineer?
Oh, that's a good question. I started out primarily looking at Android, and I think it probably has to be one of my favorite applications to reverse because I love the open sourceness. Is that a word? I don't know.
Yeah, which
It is now.
It is.
Can we
now, I
make? Are we
guess.
making shirts up for that? Just like I did for Rust.
I do love the open sourceness of the Android platform. I did a previous talk, that was my DEF CON talk actually, about manipulating the Android runtime. And really the only thing that makes that a possible talk to be able to give is the fact that you can go through all of the code inside of the Android open source project and follow the code from like Java to underlying native implementations of structures and stuff like that, and be able to understand what is the Android runtime actually doing. And I think mostly because of that, it's probably my favorite platform to take a look at because there's so many possibilities there.
Cool. And for iOS, are you mostly dealing with kind of rooted phones to analyze, or are you analyzing just the binaries themselves?
It really depends. So if I already have an IPA file, files are the main application bundle type for iOS applications in the App Store. If I already have the IPA file from like VirusTotal or Malware Bazaar, then I'm not going to probably bother running it on a device because it's kind of a pain to have your jailbroken device. And if you reboot, it's not jailbroken anymore. Oh, it's just so annoying. But yeah, it's
Clearly, I haven't done
I mostly do that.
So,
I mean, that's good from if I use an iPhone perspective, but from a trying to analyze it, it's hell.
going back to Android. So, are you updating? How often are you updating your target then, or does it even matter really?
Do you mean like my emulators or?
A little bit. Well, do you ever even bother with not the emulator? I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yes, use the emulators. They're most up to date. They run just fine. You could specify whatever. But I'm just kind of wondering, like, are you ever working with the hardware itself? And if so, do you have particular preferences? Like, do you always want to stay cutting edge? Do you want to stay towards the back of the pack, or do you want to stay with what's the most popular model at the time? And are you picking kind of like Samsung with a bunch of like annoying apps on it, or are you picking the pure Google experience or something else?
I will be honest, it really depends on the application. So when you're starting to look in Android apps, you usually take a look at the Android manifest first of all, which shows like all the configurations. It also defines the minimum, maximum, and target API version. So I'll just usually spin up an emulator with whatever, close to whatever target version I need for that particular application. And that's also another reason why I really like to use emulators, if at all possible, because the limits are pretty much whatever I want them to be. I have API versions from like 16 to 34 or anything that I could really ask for. Okay. Also with the Google Play Store and without, because I definitely prefer being able to get root on the device.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you have an old iOS device, that's not going to happen.
Well, how old at this point?
Well, I mean, for JTAG.
Yeah.
Because we spoke with Stack Smashing last year, and he did the debug interface, but you need to have a rooted. Well, yeah. You need not only the rooted, but there's a particular version where you can actually blow the fuse or revert the fuses to let you get to the JTAG.
Yeah, I have I'll be honest, I have about 5 iPhones behind me right now that I call it my stimming station because you can just put a lot of cool colors and stuff. But if I ever need a particular version, yeah, for iOS it gets really hairy because you have to have the physical device. That's probably another reason why people usually hate, in my experience, reversing iOS as opposed to Android.
Yeah.
It's more expensive.
It is. Oh, yeah. Like even I mean, that was such a big difference. Like early on in the 2009s, 2010s was like the cost to just be a developer was huge.
But also, for all the folks trying to analyze these like WhatsApp remote code execution stuff, I don't know, all that's it's really hard to analyze the malware. It's hard for malware to get in there, but it's also near impossible to see what happened, and it's kind of double-edged sword.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You just mentioned having a bunch of iPhones behind you, and tangent back to YouTube, the background of your videos is really neat. How did you pick all the different retro computers and other gizmos, and do you have a favorite?
Oh, good question. I think I have two iMacs behind me, and those are probably my favorite because I don't know if you've looked at like the backgrounds on those. I'm running Mac OS 9 at the moment, but they're awesome. They're so cool looking. Like they're the quirkiest backgrounds in the world. I mean, aside from that, I have a couple like oscilloscopes, and I have an eMac as well. Yeah, I think definitely the iMacs, because also the background of the physical machines has these really awesome colors. I have this kind of dream that computer styles are going to go back to the retro look because those were so awesome looking. I just really like that
Are we talking
style.
the jelly color? I'm assuming we're talking about the jelly color.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
Yes.
late 90s.
Early 2000s,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, those were fun.
I couldn't afford any of that stuff. I was so hardcore Windows, Linux. Like,
Well, luckily it's fairly cheap now. I mean, since it's all so old,
Yeah.
I think Facebook Marketplace has a ton of junk, especially people who are trying to get rid of old
I really like
stuff
the
that
way
used to
that
be in
you're
schools.
upselling when people left Craigslist, this is where they went.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're absolutely right. Like, yes, the number of times I've bought Newtons and other shit off of people, that's far too old.
You mentioned OS 9.
That's a little
I
old.
noticed. Well, a lot of your videos, you're rocking Windows XP or something skinned to look like Windows XP, which is the best Windows.
Yeah.
But why?
Well, honestly, at this point, I find it hilarious because, particularly when I'm live streaming, people just look at me like, what is going on? They're like, are you running XP? And then sometimes they'll be running like a VM inside of there that's connected to Linux, and they just have no idea what's going on. So instead of telling them that it's RetroBar at this point, I'm just like, oh yeah, this is Windows XP. I totally modified this.
Best.
I still have a laptop with XP that I use for Windows stuff because it works.
When
Oh yeah.
when one of my when my customer was Microsoft and I had access to the store, I did buy an actual legitimate copy of XP because, I felt bad of all the pirated versions I had. So I cherish it as a legal copy in case I ever get. But
It's great. I love the lack of depth in ASLR. Like if you're trying to do an exploitation class or something. That was the first time I'd used XP in a really, really long time.
what couldn't you
And-
do that you noticed right away on XP that you could on the other ones? Because I don't remember which video. I had to watch a video. Somebody was showing young people XP, and a lot of them were upset that no Windows 98. That's what they
Oh, that
were
was
showing.
98. Yeah.
All the things that they couldn't do. They were so much.
I mean, I think you can do most of the stuff you want. It's pretty good. Like you can code on there. I wanted to do a video at some point of coding on XP, like actual XP
Okay.
instead of RetroBar. We'll see if I get around to it though.
Notepad
I mean,
which I mean,
Yeah,
that one
was
still
that
looks the
even
same.
on there? I don't remember Notepad++.
oh
on
no,
there.
I don't think so.
No, that's what I used back
Oh.
when I was using XP.
Oh, wait.
You could use regular Notepad
Yeah, I was gonna say. I'm like, I think they only had Notepad.
and WordPad
Yeah.
and Pinball.
Yes, pinball.
Oh, I love pinball.
Yes, pinball.
So that's a fun one, right? Because they stopped including it because they didn't have the source for 64-bit to recompile it. That's what I think.
That's what I heard too. That's crazy. That is so sad though, because I love that game.
Somebody ported it to WebAssembly, and so
You're kidding.
Yeah, no, I'll put it in the show notes. But I remember discovering it not that long ago and just playing at work.
Well, I have to ask. Like, it really surprises me. Like, given that people, of the three main games that Microsoft would give you for free, Minesweeper, Solitaire, that pinball game. It really surprises me that nobody was able to reverse engineer that binary to like figure out a way to port.
I heard it was just so poorly written
Yeah,
that nobody
tracks.
could figure it
That
out.
tracks. There you go. But that was all that code. Okay.
Yeah, I found a link to it, but it's very loud, so
It's
I'm
very-
just gonna. I opened it and I was like,
oh my god.
so I'll just put the link on the show notes.
Okay.
And then I put it here on the chat in
Okay.
case you. But yeah.
Okay. Alvaro, that's very amusing. Okay, we're gonna move on. So can you tell us a bit about the cybersecurity and malware news Twitter and X/X Spaces? Because as you know, Twitter/X is still happening, and quite frankly, we're so grateful that you're still on there because that was the only way that we were able to reach you. And nobody, it's really, you can't reach anybody on that thing, and feels like all the hackers have been scattered to the four winds.
It's a very interesting kind of thing that's happened. I mean, everybody's scattered across like Twitter/X, Mastodon, a ton of other
Blue
ones.
Sky.
Yeah, there
Bluesky.
you go.
Sounds like a beer.
It's so confusing to me. I still feel like X was the first. So that's where I am. I don't know.
Elon appreciates you saying that.
Yeah. So regarding the spaces that I host, I really thought it would be fun to be able to kind of connect with the cybersecurity community. There's really not too many ways that you can connect across different companies, across different focuses, across all of these different areas, and give people the chance to be able to share like their opinions, their research, and so many other different things. And it's really paid off, in my opinion, because the things I learned from my spaces are super, super cool. I think probably the favorite event that I had was I was talking a little bit about this sort of quote-unquote vulnerability for Tesla Wi-Fi, where people could make kind of fake Wi-Fi networks as they were charging their Teslas. And then this one guy inside of my space was like, hey, I've got a Tesla. Let me go see if I can add this key right now. So it was like this live debugging experience where he was like, yeah, I can add this digital key. Oh, that's so weird. And so we were talking about some of the security vulnerabilities there. But the primary focus of these... Yeah, the primary focus is just to talk about news. I usually pick maybe 4 topics to bring up and then a couple discussion points. And I introduce the topic and then ask people, try to get people's opinions. Sometimes it's challenging to get people to speak because, you know, in this field, a lot of people are super introverted, including myself. So it's very hard to speak in front of 50 other people. And then, yeah, it's been really cool.
I would also say the judging or worry about getting it wrong, I think, is also...
Oh, yeah. I mean, that happens a lot, but if you talk publicly, you're going to be wrong. At least once, many, many times, probably.
That's a good way of seeing it.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you're going to be wrong. Don't worry about it. Everyone is wrong. I also think
Absolutely.
a little bit of probably imposter syndrome hits hard when you hear other people talking about stuff they really know. You're like, whoa, I definitely don't know this that well. But
Oh, yeah.
we should probably back up real quick and explain what Twitter Spaces are for those who are unfamiliar. But it's just like...
Because you left before this all happened.
Well, no, they were there before. And there's the closest I remember seeing early pandemic times, there's the app called Clubhouse, and it's just little chat rooms, but it's just voice chat only, right?
Yeah.
Is that the best way to describe it?
I kind of call it like a podcast, but where everybody in the world can speak and you have no idea what people are going to say.
Well, I mean, I thought you could have like a panel. Like I think you can control some people.
Yes.
But I also think that don't you have to have it's like a paid feature, or
I don't
eventually
think-
they made it paid, maybe?
I don't think it's paid right now, if I remember. But you can approve who's allowed to speak and who isn't allowed to speak. You can also add a certain amount of co-hosts that are allowed to let people speak and stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, if somebody starts going crazy, you can definitely mute them. But I really have not had any problems
And
so far.
are these on a regular cadence or...
Yeah, I try to host these every Monday evening. And yeah, for the most part, it's like Monday at 6 p.m. PST.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we'll I don't know if I can link to them, but people can go to your Twitter X profile.
Oh, yeah,
Are there
and
other
see.
things that you host through Twitter besides just the news and those types of discussions?
No, it kind of started out not just as news. I was trying a few different topics to see what people were mostly interested within. I talked about like tech and good resources for learning stuff. But I think the most popular thing, the most interesting thing ended up being the cybersecurity news. And it's good accountability for me as well to stay up to date with things. You know, like the XZ backdoor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It forced me to know what I was talking about before I explained it. I think there is a video opportunity inside of the X Spaces, but I have not used it before.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask about this last Monday because this weekend was really exciting for reverse engineering community. I was in so many different like Slack groups where people were taking this apart real time and just following along was one like being in a CTF team and watching people work, and the other it was just like a little kind of like a movie, you know, you're watching it unfold.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I like when something big. Well, not that I like backdoors or anything, but I like when something big happens in cybersecurity because it's really exciting. Like everybody gets super interested in it, and it's kind of like the whole community is working together.
I think it's big when the normals are
Yes.
know about it.
Exactly.
I feel like the last big one like this was probably Log4j or in a similar scale.
Some of the stuff with the Lockbit ransomware group as well, the website getting seized. I think that's the last thing I remember being super popular, but definitely not as popular as the XZ stuff.
Yeah, no, the scale of it, it was, like you say, it feels bad saying it was a fun weekend, but it was.
Yeah.
You also do cybersecurity office hours. Can you tell us about those?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Those are a lot more chill. I will say usually it's just me playing a game. I've been super into Neon White lately. I don't know if you guys have played it, but
No, explain.
It's just like this kind of dexterity game where you have to
Like this?
I don't know, catch all of No, it's how do I even describe this? Oh my goodness.
No.
It's like a racing game, but you're on foot and you have to kill all these demons and go through all the obstacles.
Okay,
and
so
stuff.
parkour with monsters.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's a really
And
good
swords?
explanation. Guns.
Oh,
Mostly.
guns. Okay.
But anyway, usually I play a game and then I just let people ask any kind of cybersecurity questions they might have in the chat, and it's been decently fun. Like I get quite a few questions and I never know what people are going to throw me. Like I'll get weird assembly questions that I have to answer on the fly. I'm like,
This
okay,
feels like
here we go.
boxing and chess just a little bit. Because like if like the type of game that you're describing to me sounds like Mirror's Edge, which always like makes me like totally like because I always die falling off a building. So I don't know how you can be effective answering some of those questions because
That's a challenge.
I'd have to
Oh,
it's like I said,
you know-
boxing and chess.
At first, it was very challenging, but luckily it has kind of like rounds in between where I'll do a round and then I'll answer a question. And it's kind of a good balance because, you know, people can't ask questions every second. So when there's a pause, it's like, okay, here's a game now.
What?
Alvaro, let's start a channel where you play Minesweeper and then people ask you questions. Because I feel like that's my speed. I'm like,
So one other thing, and this one I think Jen was curious about, that you hosted a malware trivia night. Was that on Twitch or Twitter? Or?
That was on Twitch. It was under the VX Underground account.
Oh, nice.
So they made the idea for it and then asked me to be like the live host who's responsible for stuff. But it ended up being a lot of fun.
What was the stuff you were responsible for?
Yeah, that's a good question. Basically being kind of a talk show host, which was definitely a first time for me. I've never been a talk show host before. The best way that I prepped for that, which was also a good excuse to watch TV, was like just watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and
that's what you
Family
watched.
Feud.
Oh, I love Family Feud.
Did you have to kiss anybody? Because that seems like part of the Family Feud
the old
experience.
creepy host
It doesn't
man?
matter. They're all like that.
Well, no,
Steve Harvey's
fortunately
like
it's like online, so yeah.
Did you have to set up all the questions, or did they help out with that?
It was kind of a group effort. First, they sourced the questions just from the general public, like they posted on Twitter to see if anybody had questions. And there were some surprisingly good questions from there. There was a lot of like spam and stuff as well, but there were some really, really good questions. Basically, we had to go through and find the proper questions and kind of pad with a couple extra questions. I think we ended up with like 64 of them. And it was very challenging because, you're trying to do this online. So you've got 4 teams. You can't really give them all the same question without them hearing the previous question. So you've got to like categorize them by difficulty, by category, and make them equivalent. There were some disputes. Like this one team kept saying, this is too hard.
So this is part of the reason why I wanted to ask that question, because we did the same thing at the Mountain View reverse engineering meetup. We did that, and I put together all the questions, and yeah, that was my biggest fear, was getting people saying no, that's not right, and contesting that. So I was like, oh man, I need to have citations. I need to make sure my wording is good. Like I need people to double, triple check.
That did absolutely happen. There were a couple questions about malware history. I can't remember exactly what they were. I think it was something to do with Heartbleed.
Yep.
And someone was like, that's incorrect. And I was like, I think it's good. But then there's this kind of voice in the back of my mind saying, well, how do you know? Maybe it is incorrect.
That's why I was like, look, okay. I think we all know Wikipedia is not the greatest resource in the world. It's a start, not the end. But I ended up referencing it a lot. I'm like, that's what it says on Wikipedia. Take it up with them.
Yeah,
but no one
there you
contested
go.
anything, so I was very relieved. But that's my. So, did you learn anything from this experience? Anything new?
I think probably the main thing I learned was just how to run a talk show. A lot of the questions I was reading live and I couldn't even comprehend because I'm just trying to keep everybody interested. And so you're at the point where you're like, okay, I'm reading this question. I'm trying to get their answer. I'm trying to make this interesting. So that was probably the hardest thing for me. Surprisingly, the main thing I learned when I was doing this was how to code in JavaScript better, because
that's not what I expected to hear.
I know. It's a funny story, though, because there were no game show overlays for OBS, the recording and streaming software that I use.
That's surprising.
I mean, there were some, but they were so specific that you couldn't change, like, multiple choice and stuff like that. I ended up writing the overlay from scratch as a browser overlay.
Okay.
And I did that all in like JavaScript and HTML. And I will be honest, I am a backend developer. So I ended up with like weird hard-coded IPs, WebSockets, plus another connection to try and sync the data between OBS and then like this administrator page. And oh my gosh, my JavaScript skills have improved at this point. Okay. But somebody asked me for the code, and I'm like, oh, you don't want this code. It is barely working at this point.
I think what I've learned here is that when faced with a make versus buy situation, you are a make person.
Yeah, for the most part. I just like to be able to have it do exactly what I want it to do.
Mm-hmm. Do you also make all the graphics for your videos?
Oh, yeah. I do all of that like in After Effects and the Adobe Creative Suite.
That's pretty cool.
Are you using any AI-generated stuff?
Well, for my desktop backgrounds, I always use like AI art, and I've gotten so many people reaching out to me saying, oh, how do I get your desktop background? And I'm like, man, you can generate it.
That'll be unique.
Yeah. Where were we? What were we talking about? Oh, like basically hacker trivia, malware trivia night. Yes. Okay, we're good. Have we exhausted this topic?
I do actually have. I have a funny story still related to the trivia night. Just real quick. I think what people don't realize is that the front end of the show, it looks cool, and it's got all these cool sound effects, and I've got like smoke and everything like that, but the problem is I can't hear any of that. So when I'm trying to like be the host, I have no idea what people are able to see or what people are able to do. So everybody sees this cool front end, but then from my perspective, it's just dead silence with nobody else in the room with a camera facing me. I honestly find it pretty comical.
That's the real host practice. You don't have a live audience or anything.
I would have to say, so one of my these Alvaro knows this, but like one of my side jobs is doing all this voiceover stuff, and it's like you're just talking in a room by yourself, and then somehow it sounds magical when they add all the other stuff on it. You're like...
But from your perspective, it's so just quiet.
It's
scarily quiet.
Yeah, it's really like that's what all this stuff is. So it's
well, and this is the upgrade. At Jen's last place, it was a closet.
It was, yeah.
So
I'm still in the closet. It's just a much bigger one with better treatment.
Yeah, Bay Area closets are small.
That was a walk-in closet, sir.
Those can be surprisingly large.
Yes, this is also a walk-in closet, which could probably be a second bedroom.
Man, I'm jealous.
Well, you have to leave Silicon Valley to get one of these. Okay. So, where were we talking? Oh, Will, where do you see the mobile threat landscape heading towards?
Smooth transition. Sorry.
Well,
I feel like I just did a Miss America question and just busted on her. Tell us about world peace and threats to it.
Yes, well, there's lots of threats to it with the mobile threat landscape. Okay, so for the mobile threat landscape, basically, I've said this quite a few times in, I don't know, a lot of the different events that I do. Everything at the end of the day is pretty much spyware. If you think about it, you have your phone on you pretty much 24/7, and I think probably 99% of the population. Yeah, we've all...
Yeah, my other one's upstairs.
Got our phones.
We show our phones to each other.
And I've still got my 5 iPhones behind me as well. There we go. But anything that you find like it's really popular and really big in the news these days is usually ends up being spyware because they're able to get your sensitive photos that might be on there. They're able to record your audio, able to even record video. And the primary targets for a lot of this spyware are really like diplomats and people in positions of power. And a lot of the attacks on these people are really sophisticated attacks that have multiple different exploits inside of the attack sequence. Like a ton of different 0 days that people are not even aware of. Probably one of my favorite ones was like Operation Triangulation that Kaspersky did a really good talk on. Oh yeah, and I loved the title of that.
In the show notes.
We can add a link to that.
I liked that they called it "This is what you get when you attack security researchers" or something like that, because they did this most amazing write-up I've ever seen, but it was incredible. So that's primarily where I see the threat landscape going, is just more and more targeted attacks with spyware, usually pretty simple payloads of spyware at the end of the day. I mean, other than that, I talked a little bit about it briefly, mostly focusing from the Android perspective. What I usually see, malware authors like ScriptKitties, who used to be writing really simple applications, are now moving more towards utilizing native code and C and C++, mostly for the reasons that I mentioned a little bit earlier on, where they realize it's a little bit harder to reverse engineer, so they're trying to make it as difficult as possible and requiring the most background possible, like the Java native interface, being able to pull out the native binaries, seeing when native code is referenced. And primarily what I see these used in is like stub applications that are packers. So this is the first stage of packed applications, where usually this is just responsible for decrypting and loading a secondary executable. This is going to be a Dalvik executable inside of Android. And now that decryption and dynamic loading portion is usually happening inside of native code. So all of those packers that are either custom packers or publicly available packers are definitely shifting to calling these inside of native code.
Let's take a couple steps back.
Sure.
Definition, what is a packer? Also, what is a stub application?
That's
Go.
definitely good. So a packer is usually something that just takes an application, creates this kind of default code that's not related to the underlying actual functionality. Some other common packers not in the Android space, you might have heard of like UPX and stuff like that. It's basically just a wrapper around the actual payload. Now, a stub application, I guess that might be more of an Android-specific term, but it's basically just the stub portion that does the unpacking process before the secondary payload, which is the real malicious code that's going to be executing, is actually loaded and called.
Okay. So the Dalvik is so let's say I have my Android phone. Somehow it's either downloaded some malicious application or it's been sideloaded through USB. And then there's whatever Android has to install that application. Then what's happening next? Is the stub starting to execute that? Or I'm not quite clear.
Yeah, let me walk you through that. You have the APK file, which is the Android package. That's your default package that gets installed, whether you sideloaded it or whether you installed it from like the Google Play Store or something. That calls this thing called classes.dex. Dex stands for Dalvik executable. It's basically just the primary executable type. Now, inside that initial Dalvik executable, you have the packing code, or rather the unpacking code, that's responsible for performing the decryption on maybe a secondary file. And after you have the decryption portion, that one's going to be the initial stub application, it loads a secondary classes.dex or Dalvik executable that is going to be the payload portion of this that contains the real malicious code. And usually it's pretty straightforward. It's just like reading your SMS messages or something like that. Especially if it's packed, they don't try super hard to make the second stage that complex.
Okay. And would that secondary one, would that be downloaded? That would all be part of that manifest in the
Yeah,
APK?
the interesting thing is you have to declare all of the different components inside of the Android manifest. So even if you have a second application that is loaded dynamically and contains extra classes and code, you have to declare the references to those classes inside of the Android manifest, even if they're not loaded on disk. So even if they're loaded dynamically, you have to have those as reference. So it's really easy to tell if an Android application is packed because you're like, oh, I see references to classes that are not inside of this classes.dex file.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
And so I guess for, most people, like you said, everyone has a phone. It's a pretty huge target worldwide. I mean, there's tons of computers and servers and all that stuff, but stuff that affects most people, it's probably going to be a phone thing. And you mentioned, or maybe just written here, that there's a lot more desktop reverse engineers versus mobile. Why is that? If there's so many phones and it's such a big target?
Yeah, to me, I see it as a huge target. But I think the primary reason is that it kind of seems scary because, as we were talking about earlier, there's just so many less resources out there. And so a lot of people think of it as kind of a daunting thing. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about reverse engineering iOS, and he was, I believe, a macOS reverse engineer. And so I was describing the process to him because he was saying, oh, iOS is way too complicated. And I said, all you have to do is unzip the iOS IPA file and you have a Mac-O binary at the end of the day. Like, you're already good to go, man. You can just start reversing iOS kind of by default. So that's probably big reason number one, is it's way harder to find details. And honestly, a lot of the details that contain excellent resources are in other languages. Like, particularly, there's really good scientific papers in Chinese about a lot of mobile application techniques, but it's very scary, if you don't speak Chinese like me, to be able to understand these.
So
Let me see.
so Google Translate or
Actually, ChatGPT does like the best job.
Yeah. Okay.
It's really made it possible to be able to understand scientific papers in other languages.
Yeah, my sense was that was like some of the first things I saw people when ChatGPT 3 and then 4 we noticed it really jumped forward for this type of thing.
Translations.
Oh, yeah.
Translation, even computer language.
I'm surprised when you say scientific papers for computer security stuff. I always imagine this being like a blog post or like a text file somewhere. But that's really cool
Alvaro.
that they're publishing. No, just a lot of the computer security stuff. It's like in a magazine or on a forum somewhere or
In a magazine, in paper?
I don't imagine it scientific papers for whatever reason.
I see a ton of both.
Alvaro,
Not on paper, though.
Alvaro, yeah, I was gonna say, Alvaro, you do know that we have talked to people who are adjuncts and work at universities on this stuff.
Oh, geez,
Right?
yeah.
Sorry, audience, I have to give a really stern what the hell look to Alvaro.
I don't read the papers. I read the blog posts. I read the summary somewhere.
You,
No, that's a
what
big,
about the magazines? Tell me about the magazines that you've been reading.
2600 POC,
I guess
GTFO. I don't know. I call those.
I don't think of that.
magazines.
I don't think of that as a magazine.
Journal. I guess it's a journal.
I feel like POC GTFO. I think of that more like a zine, like a highly informative zine. No, that's not the same thing.
I'm gonna blame second language here. So
okay, that's fair. But I don't think that's what's happening. So where are we?
So we're talking about like reasons there are not as many mobile reverse engineers. Yeah. I think the secondary reason that I find very interesting, but a lot of people have said to me is they're like, "Oh, mobile doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter at all. You're fine." And the main thing that the main kind of infection target or infection vector, yeah, there we go, is desktop. And I'm like, I will heavily disagree with you there.
Who has a desktop these days?
Maybe it's like a generational thing, but as we move on to the next generations, definitely a lot of people are way more dependent upon their phones. Like the other day I was trying to show my mom. Yeah. I was trying to show my mom how to use a computer and she's like, "I don't know. I do everything on my phone."
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, and also developing countries, phones are cheap. And easy to manage, easy to just carry down everywhere. And people do financial transactions. They have their Bitcoin wallets for whatever reason on their phone.
Exactly.
Well, at least they will probably remember their, passcode on it.
Well, they made it quote unquote less secure by adding, Face ID or fingerprint because it's convenient. Because otherwise, people wouldn't even put passwords on the damn things.
Oh, I know.
I mean, there's a large threat landscape for banking Trojans, particularly inside of Android. So many.
Well,
so many good reasons to not be on Android anymore.
Well, but if you're in the EU, Apple's going to be forced to have the other app stores, so I'm sure it's going to get more interesting.
We'll see it because I was talking with somebody the other day, and apparently Apple's still trying to do like a review process for the apps that are hosted on these third-party app stores. So I'm not sure how stringent the review process is going to be, because they're pretty stringent about their current one, even though malware does still get on there.
Yeah, we'll see, right? Because if it's up to them, they review everything and approve everything. We'll
as
see
slowly as possible.
How big a slap on the wrist they get from the EU.
I feel like it sounds like all three of us know exactly how slow that process can be. Like by launch. So I'm going to do a transition, a segue, if you will. We're going to move away from this deeply technical talk. Memes are kind of like a way of life on social media. Twitter, X. I don't know about Mastodon necessarily because it doesn't feel
I'm sure
very
there's memes on there.
It doesn't feel very It doesn't feel very memey. But you recently listed this meme around like Ari's turn 4 and become one of these 4 things. And at least 3 of them are pretty recognizable. I don't know what was going on with that 4th one. Is it just is it just anime? We just do anime?
Well, I'll be honest, that one was Neon Genesis
Yes.
Evangelion.
Yeah. But I wasn't sure what I was supposed to. I was like, do we all just become like? I wasn't sure what you were trying to say with that 4th one.
Honestly, there wasn't too much thought that went into that. I was just like, haha, what if I just put anime here?
Yes, explain to the old people what your meme meant.
So, I've seen it so much and I've heard it from so many different people. There are these kind of, I don't know what to call them, decompiler wars, but wars between Ghidra, Ida, and Binja, and I've had people just try to sell me so hard on Binja or try to sell me so hard on Ida, and I'm like, I don't care. I will use whatever one happens to be the easiest one to use at the time.
And I absolutely love that you got a reply with R2 on there. It's like, what about R2?
No.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's what I was like. I'm like, what is going on here? But yeah, I expected that. I was like I said, I wasn't sure. Like, are we trolling people? Are we just trying to accept it? In my mind, and this is a very old idea, probably compared to how we view, security researchers these days. But I think of like kind of like the traditional 80s, 70s, 80s stereotype of a hacker, which is like we're just trying to get to the future. We're going to have like computers on our wrists and we're going to be hacking into things all the time. It's like basically a very dystopian Johnny Mnemonic style of being. We're not there. But then that's kind of how I read this a little bit. So that's why I was curious.
Yeah, mostly I knew that it would start an argument.
You're just trolling. Okay, got it. I wasn't sure if that's what you were doing, Lori, but yes, okay, got it.
Just prompting for conversation, civilized.
Yeah,
A cry out to the community. Are there other things that I could be after 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't really care too much what decompiler I use. I talk about Ghidra a lot, but mostly it's just because it's free. And I think that, in my opinion, a lot of the time that people spend arguing with each other about decompilers, about their IDEs, or anything like that could just be spent putting in the practice towards trying to become more proficient at the end of the day. So it's kind of like a, I don't know, amusing argument / jab, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's like, hey, you could be reversing right now, but no, you're posting.
We're doing well actually, and
comments.
argue. Yeah. I think there's always going to be a segment of any community that gets distracted by this stuff.
So you mentioned Operation Triangulation earlier. Do you have a favorite malware or that you've looked at or know about or most interesting?
Oh, I think probably my favorite malware family is from quite a few years ago. It's called Xcode Ghost. I just found the target vector for this particular campaign very fascinating because Xcode, for anybody not familiar, is the thing that Apple developers use to create like iOS, macOS, whatever OS applications and push them to the official App Store. Now, Xcode Ghost was this Trojanized version of Xcode that was released, I think, primarily to developers in China. So these legitimate developers would download this Trojanized version of Xcode and create legitimate applications. They have like this long, heavy background in development. They're completely legit developers. But this version of Xcode would slip some malicious behavior inside of their legitimate applications. And, Apple's review process also looks at the history of developers. And so if they've been pushed into kind of this older, reliable bracket, they'll get a little bit less scrutiny on the applications that they're uploading. So I thought this kind of infection vector was super fascinating because not only are you infecting the developers, legitimate developers, but you're also infecting anybody who trusts them and downloads applications that they're unknowingly uploading malicious applications to the App Store within.
I just remembered reading a little bit about it, but that's a nifty one. I mean, talk about supply chain attacks.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting because they're getting around a lot of the processes.
Well, and you're inheriting the trust, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, I mean, I would say that the underpinning of that is your reputation. And
Hmm.
now, I don't know what Apple's done since then. Maybe they've just re-leveled the playing field and everybody has to go through the same process uniformly. But it does feel like if they were keeping track before and using that as a basis for less scrutiny, it certainly seems that these developers have ruined their reputation, so now they're going to undergo more scrutiny. I mean, that would be the expectation.
I mean, fortunately, they discovered the Trojanized
Mm-hmm.
applications. I think they ended up with maybe 17 inside of the App Store. They removed the applications and then realized, after doing a ton of write ups and studies, it's not really their fault because this was a heavily targeted campaign
Mm-hmm.
for Apple developers. And so hopefully they didn't ruin their reputation too strongly because they were not aware. Although maybe they'll be more careful about where they download Xcode from in the future.
Yeah, I mean, these days it's easy because it's just like, okay, get it from the App Store.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It's like, where are you getting your Xcode? Because
I'm not sure.
they
It must have
ping
just
you
been
all the
phishing
time.
sites. But this was a few years ago, so maybe they have fixed that process now. I'm not sure.
Elra, did they fix the process? Your face is making me think that you are
Oh, I know.
cheating.
It's just like at the
Oh.
Wikipedia. No, it's been a while since I was there. Oh no, but I was there at that time. Huh. Well,
Oh.
I don't
Not
remember.
I don't know. All I know is like if it's out of date on your Mac, it's just bugging you all the time. All the time.
Yeah, but this is 10 years ago almost. So,
What was I
Yeah.
doing 10 years? I was so young back then.
all right. So we're getting to our favorite part of the podcast, which is where we get to ask you about all your favorite tools.
Well, as an Android RE, I think my favorite tool is probably Frida. You probably get this answer all the time. I don't know. Frida rocks at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I just love the compatibility with it. You can basically run it on any platform and target any platform. And if you're trying to step through, let's say, anti-emulation or anti-debug inside of Android, the way that you connect the debugger, whether it's JDB, Java Debugger, or GDB, it's extremely unreliable. And so you'll just lose connection constantly, and you're trying to step through these instructions and get past the anti-em, and you have suddenly lost connection, and so now the application's running and you have to start over again. And that happens repeatedly. But if you statically reverse engineer the application initially and then write a custom Frida script for it and then load that dynamically, you can bypass all of like the anti-emulation and stuff like that, and it just becomes such an easier process. And oh yeah, it's like my best friend when I am reversing.
Nice.
Yeah. A few folks have mentioned Frida for sure. It seems to be very, very, very popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's also a secondary tool that's built on top of Frida that's specifically for Android called Medusa. It's basically just built on top of it to where it automatically tries to load like any kind of decrypted dynamic executables, any kind of like HTTP requests. It logs all of them, and that's super helpful as well for Android specific. But yeah, definitely using Frida bindings there.
Cool. So right now I've just been Googling, not even Googling things, but Frida.re goes to Frida.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, let me try Medusa.re. And it actually goes to the website, but it's not.
I don't think
It's not the right
that's
one.
the right one.
Run virus scan.
Well, it says scalable firmware runtime, login, Medusa.
Try Medusa GitHub. That'll probably.
That one I found for sure.
Okay. Okay.
But
got
I
it.
was like, I wonder, because it's like just something.re. Why not?
Yes. Why not?
Yeah, the developer
I'll
for
tell
that's
you
super
why.
Cool too. Like he keeps really up to date
Yeah.
with requests,
Chopin.
which is
Nice.
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 Oh, cool. Yeah.
Well, do you have any more questions, Alvaro?
No, I think we've covered so much. I mean,
Oh,
we could keep going for hours, but Lori has
Probably.
things to do, I'm sure.
so we're gonna close out the show. Lori, it's been so great to have you here. Would you like to ping yourself? Would you like to plug yourself? Would you like and subscribe to yourself?
Yeah, it's been really great opportunity. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I am on YouTube. I'm on Lori Wired on every platform. Also Twitch, and yeah, I'll hopefully be talking at a couple conferences this year. If I get accepted, I'll be
Nice.
trying to at least.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
You got Recon, you got DEF CON.
Yep.
Yeah, fingers crossed, we'll see.
Cool.
Alvaro, if you want to be found, where can people find you?
The internet, alvarop.com, and then, I'm other
Mastodon.
stuff too. Oh, well, I'm on all these other ones, but I don't check it anymore. It's sad. I've kind of
It really just like
gone off the
seriously,
grid.
Elon messed up the hacker maker communities pretty.
No, that's the
pretty
thing. Subliver's
drastically.
still there, but now they're in 5 different places. So
Yeah, they are.
I have a hard time checking.
It
all
is
of them.
very hard. Let's stop. We keep complaining about it. We already did one show just complaining about that.
alvarop.com. You can find me there.
I'm Jen Castillo. I go under Rebelbot Jen on all the same platforms that I also don't check. It's whatever. I did start a Wisconsin-centric double E hardware Discord because I'm trying to find meetup times to meet people in the Midwest because there's kind of nothing unless I want to go see IEEE. So hit me up if you're into that type of thing. Maybe you have comments or suggestions or even names for the show. We still have this in the notes. Why did I do this to myself? But you can find us still on Twitter because that's how we find and book guests. So please respond. We're not pranking you. You can find us at unnamed_show or hit us up on the comment form, which we haven't checked in years, but is always hilarious. If you still can't find us, you can find us at unnamedre.com. We want to shout out all of our Patreon supporters who are so numerous. If you'd like to join them, there should probably be a link somewhere that you can
There's
find.
dozens of us.
There are dozens of us. There's actually a pretty substantial amount. Do you like stickers? Join us. Please make reviews on via your podcast app, iTunes, Stitcher's dead, so don't do that. Spotify, Amazon, whatever. Leave a review. Leave an embarrassing review. Complain about us laughing. Complain about us talking about Silicon Valley all the time. Whatevs. I think we're done.
All right. Great success.
Yay!
All right, so we're getting to our favorite part of
Yes.
the podcast, which is where we get to ask you about all your favorite tools.
No. Wait.
Wait, what?
Do it. Okay, you
Just
go
kidding.
ahead.
What was I supposed to say?
Oh, I didn't know that we asked. Okay, this is timeout. Did we ask 8? Was that 8?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just thought we got on another tangent. I didn't.
No.
You're so good at asking questions. It just was so seamless in that transition. Oh my God. I was so young 10 years ago. We're cutting all of this out.
This is the kind of stuff I don't cut and I leave it in because
No,
it's so much
you
fun.
put it at the end. You put it at the end as the cutout.
Yeah, sometimes
Or
after
Jensen.
the credit music, we'll have some good
Outtakes.
bloopers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
So now that we're at our favorite part of the show, what are your
my
favorite
favorite.
tools? Woo!